EVO.
They killed him once. That should have been enough. They poisoned him with cakes meant for a holiday table. They shot him in a palace dressed for Christmas. Some say they stabbed him repeatedly. They beat him, bound him, and threw him into a frozen river while the city prepared for the birth of Christ. And still, more than a century later, the story refuses to end quietly, because Rasputin didn't die the way men were supposed to die. And the empire that killed him didn't survive the winter. But we'll come back to that. Welcome back to the Ides of April. This is a Christmas murder, the assassination of Grigori Rasputin. Yes, it's a Christmas story, but it's not the comforting kind. It takes place in December 1916, during the darkest winter of the First World War, inside an empire already hollowed out by hunger, suspicion, and grief. This was a murder committed by men who believed that if they removed one corrupting presence, Russia might still be saved. But they were wrong. Chapter 1. Russia in December. War, winter, and the need for a devil. So by that winter of 1916, Russia was no longer losing a war. Russia was dissolving. World War I had stretched the empire beyond the limits of its infrastructure, its economy, and even its mythology. What began in 1914 as a patriotic crusade, blessed by the Orthodox Church and framed as a defense of Slavic brothers, had become a grinding industrial catastrophe. Russia's army was massive, but poorly equipped. Soldiers marched without boots. Rifles were issued, one for each pair of men, with the expectation that the second man would pick up the rifle when the first man died. Artillery shells ran short. Medical supplies vanished. Entire units froze to death before even encountering the enemy. Behind the front lines, the empire fared no better. Railways prioritized troop movement, which left cities without food or fuel. Inflation devoured wages. Bread lines stretched for blocks in Petrograd, where women, wives, mothers, widows waited in sub-zero temperatures for loaves of bread that often never came. Riots were no longer ideological, they were biological, because people were starving. And yet, Christmas was approaching. In Orthodox Russia, Christmas was not merely a holiday, it was a cosmic promise that suffering had meaning, that darkness could be pierced by divine intervention, that order would be restored through sacrifice and faith. In December 1916, that promise felt increasingly obscene. The Romanov monarchy had retreated into isolation. Nicholas II, disastrously assuming personal command of the army, was hundreds of miles from the capital, permanently tying his legitimacy directly to military failure. In his absence, governance fell largely to his wife, Empress Alexandra, German-born, deeply religious, politically naive, and profoundly mistrusted. And beside her stood Rasputin. Grigori Rasputin was not powerful in the traditional sense. He held no office, he issued no decrees, he signed no laws. But he occupied the most dangerous position in a collapsing state: proximity. He had access to the imperial family at a time when access itself had become a form of power. Rasputin's influence stemmed from a secret the monarchy could not survive becoming public. The heir to the Russian throne, Alexei, suffered from hemophilia. Every bruise risked hemorrhage. Every fall threatened death. The future of a 300-year-old dynasty rested on a child who could die from a nosebleed. Modern medicine had failed. Doctors could offer nothing but heavy restrictions and empty prayers. Rasputin, through methods still debated, hypnosis, calming authority, or simply telling doctors to stop administering aspirin, they appeared to help. And to Alexandra, that was enough. In a system built on divine right, Rasputin became proof that God had not abandoned them. To the aristocracy, he became proof that God had. Rasputin's presence violated every social boundary that kept the imperial system intact. He was a peasant from Siberia. He was uneducated, unrefined. He drank. He womanized. He prayed loudly and spoke crudely. He didn't behave like a courtier because he wasn't a courtier, and that was the problem. Rumors metastasized. He was accused of sleeping with noblewomen, manipulating the empress, selling state secrets, even acting as a German agent during wartime. Some of these accusations were clearly invented, others were exaggerated, but a few were grounded enough in reality to raise alarm. But accuracy simply ceased to matter. By late 1916, Russia didn't need evidence. It needed a villain. And Rasputin became the human shape of everything going wrong. Moral decay, foreign influence, religious fanaticism, political paralysis. He was easier to hate than some abstract system. Easier to imagine killing, at least. And Christmas intensified this impulse. Why? Because Christmas demands narrative resolution. It insists that suffering has to lead somewhere, that sacrifice will be rewarded, and that darkness is temporary. Rasputin's continued survival mocked that belief. He outlived scandals that would have destroyed lesser men. He walked away from assassination attempts. He seemed infuriatingly immune. For a ruling class desperate to believe that history could still be redirected, Rasputin became unbearable. By December, a small group of aristocrats convinced themselves of a dangerous fiction. That Russia's collapse wasn't structural, it was personal. And that if Rasputin were removed, the monarchy could be restored, the war could be stabilized, and the nation saved. They chose Christmas for the killing not because of irony, but because of symbolism. Rebirth requires sacrifice. They believed Rasputin would be that sacrifice. They didn't understand that the empire was already dying. Chapter 2. The Night at Moika Palace. Myth, Panic, and the Failure of Control. The murder of Grigori Rasputin is one of the most embellished killings in modern history, in part because the men who carried it out were desperate for it to mean something. They didn't simply want Rasputin dead. They wanted his death to function as an ending. By late December 1916, the conspirators believed time was running out. Russia's situation at the front was catastrophic. Desertions increased, morale collapsed, rumors of revolution circulated openly in the capital. Rasputin, they believed, stood between monarchy and salvation. Now, this belief was not universally shared, but it was fervent. Prince Felix Yusupov, heir to one of Russia's wealthiest families, positioned himself at the center of the plot. He was young, erratic, deeply resentful of Rasputin's influence, and convinced that history had chosen him for a decisive role. Alongside him were Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich and a small circle of aristocrats and officers who shared the same fear that Russia wouldn't survive another winter with Rasputin alive. They chose the Moika Palace not only for privacy, but for symbolism. This was aristocratic space, controlled, refined, insulated from the hunger outside. If Rasputin was to be erased, it would happen on their terms and within their world. The night of December 29, 1916, was cold even by Petrograd standards. Snow muffled the streets, churches prepared for Christmas services. Inside the palace, a basement room was staged to resemble hospitality. Wine poured, cakes arranged, music playing above to suggest a party in progress. The plan, at least on paper, was clinical. Rasputin would be poisoned with cyanide-laced food and wine. His death would be quiet, deniable, his body disposed of discreetly. Russia would wake to a cleaner future. But from the moment Rasputin arrived, the plan began to unravel. Now, accounts differ, sometimes wildly, about what happened next. This is where myth seeps in, filling in gaps left by panic and poor record keeping. Did Rasputin eat the cakes? Did he drink the wine? Was the poison degraded by heat? Was it ever added at all? What's clear is that Rasputin did not die as expected, and that failure mattered more than any later embellishment. The conspirators had prepared for a corpse. They hadn't prepared for resistance. When Rasputin remained upright, talking, drinking, merely existing, the illusion of control shattered. Now what followed wasn't strategy, it was fear. Yusupov retrieved a pistol and shot Rasputin at close range. Believing him dead, the conspirators withdrew briefly, relieved, shaken, and already beginning to tell themselves a story of success. But then Rasputin moved. This moment, the alleged resurrection, is where history becomes legend. Some accounts describe Rasputin staggering toward the courtyard. Others suggest he collapsed almost immediately. Was he then stabbed? Was he shot again? The truth is likely less cinematic, but no less revealing. Rasputin wasn't finished, and the men who planned his death panicked. Now he was shot again, and again, maybe stabbed. At some point he was beaten, bound, then dragged through snow that would later be described as blood-stained, though how much blood was present remains unclear. What is clear is this: the killing had ceased to be about removing Rasputin. It had now become about certainty, because they could not afford ambiguity. In a political assassination, ambiguity is lethal. A dead man can be denied, but a survivor becomes a rallying point, a miracle, a rebuke. The conspirators understood, perhaps instinctively, that Rasputin's death had to be absolute. So they carried his body to the Neva River. The river was frozen over in places, dark and sluggish beneath the ice. The body was weighted down and thrown in, not ceremonially, but urgently. This wasn't ritual. This was just disposal. And the irony, of course, is that the autopsy later revealed that Rasputin had drowned. This single fact has fueled a century of myth-making. Popular retellings suggest supernatural resilience. A man immune to poison, a body refusing bullets and blades, a mystic too powerful to kill. But the reality is more mundane and more damning. Rasputin didn't survive because he was superhuman. He survived because the men who killed him were freaking amateurs. They weren't trained assassins. They were aristocrats acting out a fantasy of control. They believed that their social position granted them competence in violence, but it didn't. Their failure to kill Rasputin efficiently exposed the hollowness of their confidence. The empire's ruling class, educated, privileged, insulated, couldn't even manage a murder cleanly. And that mattered, because the assassination of Rasputin was not just a crime. It was a rehearsal for what came next. Improvisation, panic, overcorrection, violence replacing governance. When Rasputin's body was recovered days later, the city buzzed with rumor. Some celebrated openly, but others were uneasy. But many expected immediate change. None came. The war didn't improve, food didn't miraculously arrive, authority didn't return. Christmas passed not as renewal, but as delay. The conspirators had removed a man, but they had not addressed a system, and within weeks, their act would be revealed not as salvation, but as confirmation that the old order had lost faith in everything except force. Yes, they had killed Rasputin, but they had not killed the conditions that made Rasputin necessary. And history would never forgive them for confusing the two.
Our dogs are family, and they deserve food that treats them that way. That's why Ollie makes meals with fresh, human-grade ingredients you can actually recognize. Chicken, beef, carrots, blueberries, spinach, no fillers, no byproducts, just real nutrition slow-cooked to keep your pup healthy and energized. Shinier coats, better digestion, more energy, And with 5 protein-packed flavors, like beef with sweet potatoes or turkey with blueberries, your dog may be eating better than you. Every plan is customized to your dog's age, breed, and activity level, and delivered right to your door in perfectly portioned, easy-to-serve packs. Simple, fresh, and made just for them. Now here's how you can try it. Your dog's well-being starts with their food, and that's why Ollie delivers fresh, human-grade food that your dog will love. Head to ollie.com/Ides. Tell them all about your dog and use code IDES to get 60% off your welcome kit when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a happiness guarantee on the first box, so if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. That's OLLIE.com/Ides and enter code IDES to get 60% off your first box. Most people can't name every financial account they have or what any of them are really worth. A 401k here, an old brokerage there, a few credit cards, maybe a forgotten savings account. It's a kind of financial fog, and it's costing people money. Monarch cuts through that fog. It's an all-in-one personal finance platform that brings your entire financial life together, cleanly, clearly, and instantly on your laptop or your phone. Link your accounts in minutes. See where your money's actually going and take control of it. Monarch does the heavy lifting. Smart categorization, powerful visuals, and planning tools trusted by professionals. It's been named Best Budgeting App of 2025 by the Wall Street Journal, Forbes' Best App for Couples, and listed among CNBC's top fintech companies in the world. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code IDES at monarch.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code IDES.
Chapter 3. The Assassination That Saved Nothing. The men who killed Grigori Rasputin believed they were acting at the last possible moment. That belief is common in political assassinations. It's also almost always wrong. By December 1916, the Russian Empire was already beyond the reach of singular acts. The war had hollowed out the state. Trust in the monarchy had collapsed. The economy was failing. The army was exhausted. The people were starving. These weren't problems that could be solved by removing a mystic from a palace basement. But assassinations are rarely about solutions. They're about narrative control. Rasputin's influence, real or imagined, had become a story powerful enough to displace reality. He was blamed for military defeats that he didn't plan, for political paralysis that he didn't engineer, for moral decay that he didn't invent. In a collapsing system, blame concentrates. It seeks a human form, and Rasputin provided one. His mystique, carefully cultivated by supporters, wildly exaggerated by enemies, allowed Russia's ruling class to believe a comforting fiction, that their problems were not structural, but personal, that corruption had a face, that salvation could be achieved through removal rather than reform. This is the psychological function of political assassination. It simplifies complexity into violence. The aristocrats who murdered Rasputin believed they were restoring order. In reality, they were admitting that they no longer knew how to govern. Violence wasn't their first tool, but it was their last, and it came too late. Within weeks of Rasputin's death, the situation in Petrograd deteriorated further. Food riots escalated. Soldiers mutinied, authority evaporated. In March of 1917, Nicholas II abdicated the throne, ending 3 centuries of Romanov rule without ceremony or resistance. The killing of Rasputin didn't delay this collapse, it accelerated it. By assassinating Rasputin, the aristocracy revealed the truth they were desperate to hide, that the monarchy had lost control not just of the country, but of itself. The act signaled desperation, not strength. It told the Republic implicitly that if murder was now acceptable as policy, then legitimacy had already failed. Political violence is often framed as decisive. In reality, it's frequently diagnostic. It reveals the moment when institutions stop believing in their own rules. Rasputin's death also exposed a deeper irony. The man blamed for destabilizing Russia had, in many ways, become a stabilizing force, at least within the Romanov household. His presence reassured the empress. His apparent ability to help their vulnerable child created a fragile emotional equilibrium. By killing him, the conspirators didn't restore balance. They removed one of the last psychological supports holding the imperial family together. And this matters because history isn't driven solely by policy. It's driven by fear and belief and perception. And Rasputin understood this intuitively. He cultivated mystery. He leaned into contradiction. He allowed rumors to flourish because they made him indispensable. His power wasn't formal, it was symbolic. He represented divine intervention to some, corruption incarnate to others. But either way, he mattered. And when he was killed, the vacuum he left wasn't filled with order. It was filled with silence. There was no policy to replace him. No reform followed. No miracle occurred. Christmas came and went. Winter deepened. The war continued. And within 18 months, the entire Romanov family, including the child Rasputin had been blamed for protecting, would be executed in a basement, not unlike the one where Rasputin died. And this is the quiet brutality of political assassination. It rarely accomplishes what its perpetrators intend. The men who killed Rasputin believed they were acting for Russia. In truth, they were acting for their own sense of agency in a world that no longer responded to them. Killing Rasputin allowed them to feel decisive when everything else felt out of control. It didn't change the outcome. What it changed was the story. Rasputin became immortal. I mean, not as a man, but as a myth. His death didn't shrink his influence, it expanded it. He became shorthand for decadence, for mysticism, for manipulation. He absorbed all the anxieties of a dying empire and carried them into history. The assassination ensured that Rasputin would outlive the people who killed him. And that is the final failure of the act. They killed him once, and that should have been enough. But history doesn't measure success by effort. It measures it by consequence. And the consequence of Rasputin's murder was not salvation. It was confirmation that the old world was already gone. The assassination of Grigori Rasputin reminds us that political murder is often committed not in strength, but in panic. It's an attempt to reclaim control when legitimacy has already evaporated. A belief that removing a symbol can repair a system. It can't. Rasputin didn't doom Imperial Russia. He merely stood close enough to the throne to be blamed when the structure finally collapsed. Violence didn't save the empire. It only revealed how desperate its guardians had become. As we move through the Christmas season, a time of reflection, reckoning, and hope, we wish you peace, safety, and perspective. History reminds us that endings rarely arrive with clarity, and renewal is never guaranteed. Be gentle with yourselves and be patient with each other. Next week, another assassination, another single act of violence carried out in public, in daylight, with the belief that history could be redirected by a bullet. It couldn't. We'll examine how one death reshaped borders, alliances, and the course of the modern world itself. Follow the Ides of April and the entire EVO Creative lineup wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. If this episode stayed with you, leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify because it helps independent shows like this survive, and we read all of them. You can watch full episodes, clips, and exclusives from all EVO Creative shows by subscribing to EVO Creative on our YouTube channel and turn on those notifications. Explore all shows and upcoming projects at evocreative.com. And if you have a story or a tip or even a correction, email us at info@evocreative.com. And if you find the show meaningful or unsettling or worth sitting with, share it, because word of mouth keeps independent networks like mine alive. And don't forget to check the show notes for amazing deals from the great companies that still support long-form storytelling. Until next time, happy holidays and stay safe out there.